Hello, I'm Ethan Miller. I'm 23 years old and work as a junior financial analyst at a renowned firm. My life is a quiet routine, surrounded by numbers dancing across spreadsheets and meetings that follow in a monotonous cycle. The fluorescent hum of the office is almost always my sole companion, and the sound of the keyboard has become the soundtrack to my solitude. Each day I sit at my desk, staring at the computer screen, and my mind wanders to thoughts beyond the charts and financial projections. But amidst all these spreadsheets, one figure stands out: Victoria Sterling. She is the Chief Financial Officer, and the power emanating from her is almost palpable. At 35, Victoria is a woman of undeniable presence, known for her sharp intellect and impeccable image. Always dressed flawlessly, her rigid posture and firm decisions intimidate me. As I admire her from afar, I notice the respect everyone holds for her and the reverence that makes me feel small. It's as if her strength is an insurmountable wall, and I, a mere commoner in a kingdom of titans. As I prepared for a meeting, a strange sensation began to surface within me. Something was about to change. The idea that I might come to know the true Victoria, beyond the powerful, almost untouchable director, was a thought that haunted me. One day, during a meeting, she praised my work, and it left me in a state of bewilderment. It was a small gesture, yet its impact was colossal. I didn't know how to react. Adrenaline pulsed through my veins, and my heart raced. The formality of the situation prevented me from expressing how much that compliment meant to me, an acknowledgement from someone I admired so deeply. I also began to notice the small cracks in her armor. Once, during a break, I saw Victoria looking out the window with a distant, almost melancholic gaze. It was a brief moment, but I realized there was a human being behind that rigid demeanor. Something in my perception of her began to shift. The figure of the superwoman I so admired started to fade, revealing a person who also carried her insecurities and loneliness. Still, the immense hierarchy that existed between us made me hesitate. I couldn't see how I could possibly approach her. The day passes and the routine continues, yet the idea that something is about to happen pursues me. As I remain focused on my tasks, the atmosphere in the office seems poised for alteration. My colleagues comment on an important meeting with senior management, but none of it can divert my thoughts from Victoria. The brilliance she brings to the room isn't just professional, it's something I feel profoundly, like a flame burning amidst my solitude. When the day finally arrived, a sudden blackout hit the building, plunging everything into darkness. The sound of generators struggling to kick in echoed like an emergency signal, and I found myself trapped in the elevator with Victoria. The confined space and lack of light seemed to imprison our souls in ways I never imagined possible. Looking around, I realized we were two people, now isolated in a space that had, until then, been merely a passageway. The tension was palpable, the air was thick, and the darkness enveloped us. My thoughts revolved around the image I had of her, the strong, unshakable woman. What awaited me there, suspended between floors? What would we discover about each other in the silence that surrounded us? The initial sensation of fear soon transformed into anticipation. I was about to discover that in the dark, perhaps, we would find the light we never knew we needed. The elevator's darkness seemed to transform the space into a microcosm where the outside world became irrelevant. The silence was heavy, almost palpable. Looking at Victoria, I saw the light from my cell phone reflect on her face, revealing an expression that blended surprise and a hint of vulnerability. It was strange to think that, behind the image of the ruthless director, there was a woman who also experienced fear and uncertainties. As soon as the blackout began, the first sensation I felt was panic. The elevator's claustrophobia wrapped around me like a hot blanket. But now, beside Victoria, the fear began to dissolve into an uneasy curiosity. The figure I had always seen as untouchable, almost like a goddess on her pedestal, was now here, so close, so human. It was as if we were in a movie, in a setting where the plot was beginning to unfold in an unexpected way. I remembered how I got this job. The first time I stepped into Aperture Capital Management, my eyes fixated on Victoria, who was speaking in a meeting, her voice firm and decisive, full of authority. Looking at her, I thought I was facing a superwoman, capable of moving mountains with her decisions. From that day on, every interaction I had with her was marked by formality. I was just an analyst, and she, the director, everyone feared and respected. Yet over time, I began to notice small gestures that revealed a more human side, like when she praised my work on a presentation. "Ethan, what you did was very good. Keep it up." Those words echoed in my mind, a recognition I hadn't expected, and that somehow made me feel I was more than a mere subordinate. But even these moments of proximity were shrouded in a mantle of formality that prevented me from feeling completely at ease. Victoria had always been that distant figure, and I, the disciple who aspired, but never dared to approach. Now, here we are, in a dark elevator where hierarchies seemed to fade. The weight of the silence became unbearable, and finally, I dared to break it. "You always seem so invincible," I said, my voice hesitant, a mix of admiration and disbelief. "It's strange to see you like this here, without all your armor." She let out a nervous laugh, and that sound was like a balm to my unease. "Invincible? I don't know if that's the right word," she replied, her voice softer than I imagined. "Perhaps I'm just trying to stay afloat like all of us." That declaration stripped her bare in my view. The director, who always seemed to have everything under control, now revealed a glimpse of fragility. A surge of courage rose in me, and the feeling that we were sharing something much deeper than a simple elevator conversation took over. "I admire you immensely, you know. Sometimes I think you're the only person who truly understands the price of success," I said without thinking, knowing I am risking more than I should. She observed me, and for a moment the air between us seemed to vibrate. "You don't know how lonely that success can be, Ethan. So often I feel like I'm just fighting a strong wind, lost in the middle of a storm." And the sincerity in her tone hit me like an arrow. I never imagined that someone so strong could feel this way. In the darkness, a connection emerged, something I never expected. Victoria's vulnerability made her more real to me, and I felt like I could open up a little too. I feel that way too sometimes. All this work, the pressure, the constant thought that I'm never good enough. It's as if I'm always trying to prove something to someone who doesn't even exist. She tilted her head, and I could see her processing my words. The elevator swayed lightly, but for us, everything around seemed to have stopped. "Sometimes it's in the dark that we find the light we never knew we needed," she said. Her words resonated deeply, and amidst the profound darkness, a new perspective emerged. The vulnerability we both shared felt like an invitation for me to step into unknown territory. I felt an almost irresistible urge to draw closer, and without thinking, I extended my hand, gently touching her arm. The gesture was subtle, but its impact was profound. "Victoria," I said, my voice almost a whisper, "who knows? Maybe we can help each other find that light." The silence that followed was charged with meaning. Our gazes met, and there was a spark, something that not even the darkness could extinguish. In that moment, I realized the vulnerability I had so feared might be the path to something deeper. The elevator, with its cold, oppressive walls, transformed into a sacred space of discovery. Time felt stretched, and I knew that, regardless of what happened when the doors opened again, we wouldn't be the same people who had stepped inside. We were on the precipice of taking the first step into new territory, a space where vulnerability became light, illuminating not just ourselves but each other. The silence within the elevator became a kind of bubble around us, a space where external reality faded, and only the two of us existed. That fraction of a second extended, and I felt we were looking at each other in a way I had never imagined possible. Each of us carried the weight of our stories, but now, in this interval, there was the possibility of unveiling them, of revealing them to one another. "I never thought I could feel so exposed," Vicky said, her voice low, almost hesitant. This confession surprised me. The woman who had always seemed so strong and unshakable was now opening up in a way I never would have expected. The life I chose placed me in a position where I can't show my weaknesses, and for a long time, I thought that was all I needed to be. "I understand," I replied, feeling an even deeper connection forming. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm constantly chasing something I'm not even sure exists. What's the worth of all this effort if, deep down, I'm alone?" My heart quickened as I shared this. It was the first time I had openly spoken about my solitude. The vulnerability frightened me, but at the same time, it was liberating. "It's this solitude that unites us, isn't it?" Vicky murmured, her gaze now softer. "We're always seeking validation, but deep down, what we truly want is to be seen." I had never heard her speak this way. Vicky, the director who had always seemed so distant, was now a colleague, a confidant. "Do you feel alone, even surrounded by people?" I asked, intrigued. She sighed, a heavy sound of a burden that seemed to have been carried for a long time. "Yes, work is everything. It always has been. But there's a void I can't fill. Success doesn't seem worth it when there's no one to share it with." As we spoke, I felt the elevator sway slightly, and the light briefly recovered before extinguishing again. The sound of the generator attempting to stabilize echoed, bringing with it a sense of temporary despair. The space seemed to tighten even more, and the tension mounted. But it was no longer the tension of fear. It was a tension of anticipation. "You've always been so admired, Vicky. I never imagined you felt this way," I said, watching the soft glow of my phone illuminate her face. A melancholic smile touched her lips. "What do you truly desire, if not success?" She paused, as if weighing her answer. "I want to be seen as a person, not just as a director. I want people to understand that behind my professional facade, there's an ordinary woman, full of dreams and fears." The palpable sense of connection deepened. What once seemed an insurmountable barrier between us now dissolved into air. "Perhaps you could show me who you truly are," I suggested, a surprising trace of boldness in my own voice. Vicky offered a shy smile, yet the light in her eyes told me she was willing to take a chance. "And you, what do you want, Ethan?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? The answer lingered on the tip of my tongue, but insecurity clung to me like a persistent shadow. I want to be more than just the analyst who crunches numbers. I want to be someone who makes a difference, who connects, who truly lives," I confessed, the words escaping like a breath. "And perhaps I'm not so different from you." The air between us seemed to hum with that confession. The silence, once oppressive, was now imbued with possibility. Without conscious thought, I leaned a little closer and she mirrored my movement. Our gazes locked once more, and for a suspended moment, the world around us vanished completely. The elevator became a universe unto itself, where time held no dominion. Then, in a fleeting fraction of a second, the atmosphere shifted. An irrepressible impulse drew our lips to meet softly. The kiss was hesitant, yet laden with profound meaning. It felt as though we were sharing the entire weight of our individual lives in that single, shared moment. The connection forged between us transcended hierarchy, fear, and deeply rooted insecurities. When our lips parted, I realized the elevator's darkness was no longer oppressive. Instead, it was comforting. We were together in this confined space, and everything that had come before, the insecurities, the fears, had, at least for now, been left behind. "What was that?" Vicky whispered, her eyes shining with a mixture of surprise and pure delight. "I don't know, but it felt profound. I believe we finally allowed ourselves to be truly vulnerable," I replied, a warmth spreading through me. She laughs, a sound illuminating the darkness. "I suppose so, but in her eyes I see a trace of worry. And now? What do we do with this?" The question echoes. The elevator is stalled, but the life awaiting us outside seems promising. "We take it one step at a time," I say, my certainty growing. "And together, perhaps we can face whatever comes." The elevator light flickers again, and relief washes over me. A different future begins to form. Regardless of what happens when the doors open, I know this moment will change our lives forever. We are ready to face whatever comes, together for the very first time. When the elevator finally began to move again, I felt a wave of expectation mixed with fear. The lights flickered, and with each floor we passed, the reality outside approached, bringing a new dynamic we couldn't ignore. Victoria was beside me. What had been an isolated moment was now a new phase of our lives. The doors opened with a soft ding, revealing the office corridor, now more hostile than ever. The familiar environment had turned into a minefield, where any misstep could reveal what we'd shared in that small, dark space. As we exited, exchanging a knowing glance, the connection we'd formed in the elevator seemed to vibrate in our silence. In the days after that moment, the tension between us intensified, but differently. It was palpable, like static electricity in the air. Whenever our hands brushed passing documents or our gazes met in meetings, an unexpected warmth took hold. Each interaction became a delicate game where the unsaid spoke louder than any word. At the same time, a growing fear emerged that what began as a moment of vulnerability would become something more complicated. One afternoon, preparing a report, I noticed Victoria was quieter than usual. Her face, when I looked, held a mix of determination and hesitation. "We need to talk," she said directly, but with a soft, almost vulnerable tone. Stomach churned. "About what happened in the elevator. We need to understand it before the situation gets more complicated." A knot in my throat formed. Exposing what we'd built made me nervous. "Of course, I agree," I responded, trying to keep my voice firm. But inside, my heart raced. What would our connection become if exposed? What of our careers? We set a meeting for that evening, choosing the Daily Grind, a discreet coffee shop in West Loop near the office. It was a place that offered a welcoming and intimate atmosphere. As I stepped inside, the aroma of fresh coffee and the soft hum of conversations in the background created the ideal setting for the talk that needed to happen. We settled at a secluded table, far from the curious gaze of colleagues. "Ethan," Victoria began, her tone serious, "I've thought a lot about what happened and what it means for us. We can't ignore what we feel, but we also can't simply be swept away by impulse." I listened intently, feeling the mounting pressure in my chest. "I don't want this to end. What we started in that elevator was something I never expected, but I also can't deny it changed everything inside me," I said, feeling the urge to be honest. "I think we need to decide if we're going to fight for this, or if we're going to let fear stop us." Victoria looked at me, her eyes reflecting the internal battle she was fighting. "I've always been so focused on my work, Ethan. For me, vulnerability is a weakness. What will people think? What if this affects our careers?" Her voice was heavy with emotion, and her concern weighed upon us. "If what we have is real and valuable, then we should be willing to face the consequences. I can't lose this." The determination in my voice was stronger than I had imagined. I don't want to be trapped in a loveless routine. I never did, and I don't think you do either. A silence hung between us, and as time passed, the tension slowly dissipated. Victoria took a deep breath, and I saw the shift in her gaze. You're right. I don't want to ignore what we feel, but we need to be careful. We need to be discreet. I accept, as long as we can keep meeting like this, I said, a smile forming on my face. The relief I felt was like a weight being lifted from my shoulders. As days melted into weeks, we began to meet in stolen moments. Our conversations grew deeper and more intimate. We shared stories of our lives, our fears, our aspirations, and the wounds that had shaped us. The Aperture Capital Management Elevator and the daily grind became our sanctuaries, spaces where we could truly be ourselves, far from the expectations and masks we wore at work. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, we decided to meet in Lincoln Park. The full moon illuminated the paths, and the soft breeze carried the scent of flowers. We sat on a bench, and I couldn't help but notice how the moonlight reflected on her face, making her seem even more beautiful. "Ethan," she began, a serious tone in her voice, "I want you to know that what we're living, this connection we have, it makes me feel alive, but at the same time it scares me. I don't want to get hurt, and I don't want you to get hurt." My heart quickened. "I'm scared too, Victoria, but life is made of risks. If we don't take them, we'll never know what we could have. Wouldn't you want to be truly happy?" She hesitated, and then, with a gentle gesture, took my hand. That simple touch made my body hum. "Yes, I do, but I want us to do this together, without letting others ruin what we have." In that instant, our connection deepened. What began as an unexpected encounter in the elevator now became a silent commitment of love and understanding. Feeling the pressure of our lives and careers all around us, we realized that true love demands courage and a desire to expose ourselves, to be seen and accepted not just as professionals but as human beings. As the relationship deepened, the weight of expectation also grew. Our vulnerability became a bond that united us, but also a risk. And as we faced the daily challenges, the question that hung in the air was, how far would we be willing to go to protect what we had built together? The love blossoming between us wasn't just a transition in our lives, it was an emotional revolution. And even if the future was uncertain, we were ready to face it together. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Victoria and me became a constant we couldn't ignore. Every furtive glance in meetings, every subtle touch as we passed documents, everything transformed into a delicate balancing act. I felt we were walking on a tightrope, and at any moment a strong wind could knock us down. The meetings that were once small refuges now became moments filled with expectation and anxiety. While I struggled to maintain the appearance of a focused and competent analyst, inside I was on an emotional roller coaster. Victoria was my light, but the shadow of our secret hung over us like a dark cloud. What could happen if someone found out? What if it affected our careers? One afternoon, as I was reviewing a report, my phone vibrated with a message from Victoria. "We need to talk. Something isn't right." My heart pounded. The tone of the message was grave, and a wave of anxiety washed over me. What did she want to discuss? The thought that we might be getting into a complicated situation left me restless. We met at the daily grind, where our pivotal talk occurred. She was there when I arrived, her expression worried. Seeing me, Victoria lifted her gaze and subtly gestured for me to sit. "Ethan, I sense things are getting complicated," she began, her voice trembling. "Complicated how?" I asked, forcing composure, yet the tension in my chest felt palpable. "Colleagues are noticing a shift. I overheard some speculation, and it made me anxious." I don't want this to become a full-blown rumor. You know the damage it could inflict on us. A knot tightened in my throat. Do you think we should stop? Should we end this? The question felt heavier than I intended. She hesitated, her face revealing an inner battle. No, I don't want this to end, Ethan, but we must be more careful. I was thinking how we could sustain our connection, yet still ensure our careers aren't jeopardized. Then let's be more discreet. We can meet away from the office, far from prying eyes. Nobody needs to know, I suggested, desperately seeking a path forward. Victoria agreed, though worry still lingered in her gaze. What once felt like an adventure now became a source of palpable anxiety. It wasn't just our feelings for each other. It was the immense pressure of shielding our secret in an environment where reputations were paramount. In the days that followed, we tried to be more discreet. Our encounters grew rarer, and our once long, profound conversations became brief and hurried. The feeling of navigating a minefield intensified. I went to the cafe with a constant dread of being seen. Returning to Aperture Capital after meeting Victoria felt like crossing a front line where any misstep could expose our secret. One week, during a particularly tense meeting, our colleague, Dan Jenkins, made an observation that echoed in my mind like an alarm. You two seem different. Is something going on between you? His question made my stomach drop. The glance he exchanged with Victoria was not lost on me, and I felt the room's tension heighten. An awkward silence enveloped the room, and I forced myself to maintain composure. We're just focused on our projects, I quickly said, attempting to shift the topic, but doubt lingered in the air, and I knew I couldn't go on like this. After that meeting, the atmosphere between us grew even heavier. The fear of discovery isolated us, and the once strong connection began to fray under the secret's immense weight. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, a message from Vicky arrived. Can we meet tomorrow? I need to talk about something important. My heart leapt when I read that. What did she want to discuss now? The fear that she might want to end what we had began to consume me. The next day, I met Vicky in Lincoln Park, and the setting that should have been relaxing transformed into an emotional battlefield. Ethan, she said, her voice trembling. I received an anonymous message this morning. Someone seems to know about us. My body stiffened. What do you mean, know about us? I asked, tension building in every word. I don't know how, but someone is speculating about a possible relationship. They don't mention names, but they hint that something is going on between us. I'm scared. This could ruin our careers. The weight of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. We need to act fast. If this spreads, it could be very difficult to reverse the damage, I said, trying to think clearly. Vicky nodded, her eyes filled with concern. We can distance ourselves from each other at the office, avoid any situation that might raise suspicion, and if anyone asks, we can simply say we're working on different projects. The idea of being away from her was unbearable, but I knew we had to be strategic. Yes, that could work. We'll focus on our jobs and keep what we have outside the office. We agreed it would be best to reduce the intensity of our relationship in the professional environment, but that decision became increasingly difficult. Feeling her touch during stolen moments was one of the few things that brought me joy. Now, that joy was being replaced by a growing emptiness. With each passing day, my longing for her became harder to bear, and as I tried to focus on work, memories of our conversations, laughter, and shared moments emerged like ghosts in my mind. What was once a strong, vibrant bond now became a distant echo of what we could be. The battle was far from over. The fight for what truly mattered was just beginning. The tension accumulated like a weight in the air between Vicky and me. The decision to distance ourselves at work seemed like the only sensible option, but with each day without our small moments together, My heart ached. My longing for her took on an almost palpable form, and I felt that our love, instead of flourishing, was being suffocated. Quick conversations and stolen glances became an agonizing routine, and the pressure of keeping what we had a secret transformed into an unbearable burden. One morning, while analyzing some reports, I was interrupted by a message from Vicky. "We need to talk. It's urgent." My heart pounded. The tone of her message left me anxious, and a wave of concern washed over me. I knew the situation couldn't continue like this. I scheduled a meeting with her that evening. At the Den on Fulton, a discreet restaurant in the Fulton Market District we used to frequent. When I entered, I saw her sitting at a corner table, her eyes fixed on her phone. Seeing me, she set the device aside and waved for me to sit down. The expression on her face was a blend of concern and determination. "Ethan, I received an anonymous email this morning, insinuating that someone is watching us." Vicky began, her voice low but firm. "They're saying we might be involved, and that could jeopardize our careers." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you want to do?" I asked, trying to keep calm. The fear of being discovered enveloped me like a storm. "What we're doing cannot continue if we are being watched. I don't want our lives to turn into a spectacle for others. We need to act," she said, her gaze fixed on mine. "What if we distanced ourselves? For a while at least, for things to calm down," I suggested, knowing this was a painful, yet perhaps necessary solution. She took a deep breath, as if weighing my words. "Yes, it might be the best way out. But I don't want this to mean the end of us. I want us to be able to meet again when things are quieter." The idea of us being separated, even temporarily, filled me with anguish. I don't want that either, but maybe it's for the best. We need to protect our careers. "This doesn't mean what we feel isn't real," I said, trying to convey to her that even amidst the fear, my heart still chose her. Vicky nodded slowly. "So, we'll distance ourselves. I'll keep my head down at work, and you too. We can talk now and then, but for now, we'll just be colleagues." As I left the restaurant, a wave of despair and sadness washed over me. What we had built was at risk, and the idea of living without her for a while was overwhelming. But at the same time, the need to protect her and protect us both was even stronger. The following days were difficult. The office environment transformed into a cold and distant space. Our interactions became strictly professional. Each glance we shared became charged with meaning, but the emotional distance was a difficult barrier to overcome. I missed her laughter, the deep conversations we had, the moments when we allowed ourselves to be vulnerable. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a presentation, a text message from Vicky appeared on my phone. "How are you?" My heart quickened at the sight of her name, a desperate flutter of hope, and I didn't hesitate to reply. "I'm okay, but I miss you." The conversation flowed slowly, each word a fragile bridge between us, yet the connection we shared, even in typed messages, still hummed with an intense, familiar resonance. "I miss you too. I hope everything's all right on your end," she replied, and that simple exchange of messages brought a momentary, tender relief to the ache in my heart. But the pressure of the environment around us continued to mount. Whispers at meetings became more frequent, and a creeping tide of rumors began to circulate through Aperture Capital Management. One day, Dan Jenkins, the colleague who had first noticed the subtle shift between us, made an observation that sent a jolt of alarm through me. "You two have been acting really distant. What's going on?" The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken implications, a stark warning. What had once been a faint whisper was now brewing into a storm, and I knew with a sinking feeling that we couldn't hide much longer. The accumulated tension was a palpable, suffocating weight, and the burden of keeping our secret was becoming unbearable. One morning, as I walked down the corridor, I caught the hushed murmur of voices emanating from a conference room. My curiosity, or perhaps my deepening paranoia, compelled me to pause and listen. I heard Ethan and Vicky are distancing themselves because of some kind of relationship, a female voice murmured. The other replied, "Yeah, everyone's talking. They used to be so close, but now it seems like there's something more to it." The ground seemed to crumble beneath my feet, leaving me adrift. I was suddenly engulfed by a volatile mix of impotent rage and crushing despair. What we were doing wasn't just a secret anymore. It was rapidly morphing into rampant gossip, a toxic speculation that could utterly shatter both our careers. I knew with a terrifying clarity that we needed to act, and quickly. With my mind a frantic whirlwind of desperate ideas, I sent a message to Vicky, pleading for us to meet immediately. When she arrived, her face was a stark canvas of concern, mirroring my own inner turmoil. "What is it?" "You look rattled," she said, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "We need to talk. About the rumors. We can't hide anymore. People are starting to speculate about us, and if we don't do something now, this could absolutely demolish both our careers," I stated, the raw urgency in my voice undeniable. Vicky's face drained of color, leaving her pale and vulnerable. "You're right. We can't let this spread. What do you suggest?" "We could hold a meeting with the department, a carefully orchestrated facade, and clarify that we are strictly focused on our work. If we overtly demonstrate our commitment to our professional roles, perhaps we can dissipate their doubts." "But what if that doesn't work? What if people continue to talk?" The raw, unvarnished fear in her eyes was palpable, mirroring the terrifying uncertainties that gnawed at me. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice a quiet struggle against the rising panic. "But we have to try. We have to face this together," I affirmed, a fragile, desperate determination beginning to solidify within me. She nodded, and together we decided we would face the situation head-on. When the meeting arrived, our hearts were racing, but we were ready to stand our ground. It was time to show everyone that we were more than just rumors, that we were dedicated professionals willing to fight for what was right and true. And regardless of what happened next, we knew we would have to face the challenges head-on, together. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense when we walked in. My colleagues' gazes weighed heavily on us, and the whispers that were once just rumors now became a deafening echo in my mind. Vicky and I sat side by side, our bodies taut, ready to face whatever came next. Dan, who seemed to be the voice of the group, began the meeting with a casual tone, but I noticed the curiosity in his eyes. "All right, everyone, we have some updates on ongoing projects. However, before that, I'd like to address a matter that has raised some questions," he said, looking directly at us. The tension intensified. Vicky cast me a glance that mixed determination and nervousness. I knew this was our moment to show we were united. Dan continued, "Lately, we've noticed the dynamic in our team has shifted. Some colleagues have been commenting on the relationship between the two of you." The silence that followed was palpable. I could feel every beat of my heart resounding in my chest. Vicky stepped forward, as if preparing to expose herself, and I followed. "Yes, we know some rumors have been circulating, but we want to clarify that our priority is our work and the team. What is happening between us should not interfere with our performance," she said, her voice firm. The room murmured, and I felt everyone's eyes on us. "We are here to assure you that regardless of our personal relationships, our main focus remains the success of the team and the company," I continued, trying to convey confidence. Dan seemed to consider our words, but distrust was still etched on his face. "I understand. But whenever there are rumors, people start to question the integrity of the work and the relationships here. How can we be sure this won't affect the team?" Vicky took a deep breath, determined to respond. "We are aware of the situation and will do what is necessary to ensure that our relationship, personal or professional, does not interfere with the team's objectives. We take responsibility for this and guarantee that our dedication to work remains unchanged. A murmur of approval swept through the room, but there was still skepticism in their gazes. I knew we needed more than promises. We needed action. If necessary, we are willing to speak with leadership and clarify our position, I said, aware that this was a risky but necessary step. As the meeting progressed, a quiet realization settled upon me. Victoria and I were more aligned than we had ever dared to be. What had started as a secret was now solidifying into a declaration of deep commitment. She offered me a discreet smile, a subtle gesture of support that fortified my resolve. As the meeting concluded, Dan Jenkins spoke up once more. "I appreciate your candor. I hope we can all move forward and maintain our focus on what truly matters. If you need support, we're here to help." The tension in the room began to dissipate, and the atmosphere felt perceptibly lighter. Once the meeting drew to its close, Vicky and I walked out together, a shared sense of profound relief washing over us. "We did it," she murmured, a genuine smile of release gracing her features. "Yes, but a considerable journey still lies ahead," I replied, keenly aware that our struggle was far from over. In the ensuing days, the office dynamic began to subtly shift. While whispers might still linger, the decisive way we had confronted the situation undeniably strengthened our standing. Our colleagues slowly started to rally behind our nascent connection, and gradually, the intense pressure receded. That evening, I met Vicky at the Daily Grind, a quiet cafe near Aperture Capital Management. The atmosphere was welcoming, and the soft lighting forged an ambiance conducive to easing our minds. "You know," she began, gazing out the window, "I was utterly terrified by all of this. But somehow, confronting this challenge only drew us closer." "I feel it too," I confessed, recognizing that each hurdle we overcame merely solidified our intrinsic bond. "And now, we know we are undeniably stronger together." She smiled, and the profound lightness we shared was almost palpable. "So, what do we do now?" she inquired. "We will continue to work diligently, yet we will also cherish the moments we find together. What we've forged is precious and utterly deserves to be celebrated," I suggested, resolutely determined not to let fear overshadow the profound connection we had meticulously built. In that fleeting instant, uncertainty yielded to a fragile, burgeoning hope. It was a new beginning, not merely for us as a couple, but also for our intertwined futures as professionals. We both knew the path ahead might prove arduous, yet we stood ready to face it together, armed with courage, love, and the profound certainty that regardless of the trials we might encounter, we would always have each other.